on that screen, and it was Sam Darnold, and we have to talk about him, of course, because the Vikings have a big decision to make. There's a report out there saying they're not going to tag him because they're trying to reach a deal, and if they can't, they're not going to use the tag. But we were just talking about it. You were asking, why let him walk then?
Well, he's number one on my list because of position value. Not that he's better at his position than other guys are at theirs, because that's clearly not the case. We saw him morph into Sam Darnold in the final 2 games of the season. That's never a good thing. That's probably why there's a little apprehension on their part. Also, the fact that they have J.J. McCarthy sitting there. So if you're looking at it and you want to tag him, that's a big number to tag him. So if they have so many other free agents. Byron Murphy, one of their top corners, is a free agent. You want to try and get some of those deals done. If you tag Sam Darnold, you're going to limit what you can do in terms of the pool. So I think that's why they're reluctant to put the tag on him. Personally, what I would do, before I'd let him leave in free agency, I would tag him and try and work out a deal with somebody. Maybe call the Raiders and say, hey, I hear you're interested in Sam Darnold. Give us something back on that, and maybe we'll get you a second or a third and a third next year, something along those lines, so you get more than you would if you got compensatory picks for losing him. So I think it makes sense. There's also some concern about, J.J. McCarthy, last time we saw him, he looked like he weighed 160 pounds on the sideline. Yep. That's a concern as well, and he's never played. So if you're Sam Darnold, why not try and work out a small extension to stay there? It was a great situation for you. They revitalized your career. It makes sense to come back.
And you know what? They just released the 1 through 32 rankings of all the organizations, whether it be meals in the cafeteria, the training room, the way they treat your family. Minnesota is and has been at the top of those lists year in, year out. They just do the football program the right way. A guy like Sam Darnold, who's been around the block a few times to some less than desired neighborhoods, we might say, he understands that better than anybody. And with his experience in Minnesota, the renaissance he had there with Kevin O'Connell, I'd almost imagine that he'd be willing to take a little bit less money to be able to stay in that position with the opportunity to compete for the #1 spot against J.J. McCarthy. And if J.J. McCarthy becomes the starter, he's going to be waiting in the wings with an opportunity to come save this Minnesota Vikings team. And he's done it before.
You know what's amazing about it when you think about this? Sam Darnold is only 27 years old.
Crazy.
If he did a 3-year deal, and let's just say he went in this season and played and was the starter and played well, and they continued to play him, he'd have an opportunity after 3 years to go somewhere else and get another contract. So it makes sense for him. Best interest of Sam Darnold is to stay in Minnesota. I think the Vikings need to find a way to make that work.
It's a special day. Another chapter closed in the NFL offseason. You see, the NFL franchise tag window for 2025, it started back on February 18th, and it closes today at 4 p.m. Eastern. Now, over the last 2 weeks, teams could apply the franchise tag to players who are about to become unrestricted free agents. In 2023, only 6 players were tagged. Last season, we got the 8 you see right here. We got Colts wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr., Jags edge rusher Josh Hines-Allen, Tampa Bay Buccaneer safety Antoine Winfield Jr. And I want you to focus in on the guy that was right down there and now up here on this list. A familiar name making the list in back-to-back years. Cincinnati Bengals placing that franchise tag on wide receiver T. Higgins for the 2nd straight year. Now, the only other player that has been tagged so far, again, remember that deadline at 4 p.m. Eastern, is your guard in Trey Smith for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, for more on our tag deadline day, we're going to send it over to the desk with Jacqueline D'Agostino, our NFL gurus. We got Kyle Long and Pete Prisco for all of the breaking news that's coming your way in the NFL.
Thanks so much, Jenny. And getting a look at some of the tag deadline news. We just talked about it. Osa Odighizuwa coming to terms on a long-term deal with the Cowboys, and then Sam Darnold, who we're going to talk about more in just a moment, unlikely to be tagged by the Vikings. But if we just take a step back and look at it as a broad thing, gentlemen, we know T. Higgins has been tagged, Trey Smith has been tagged. So far, how are you feeling as that deadline is approaching? Kyle, I'll start with you. Expecting things to get crazy? Where are you at in terms of the deadline?
2 teams that needed to address people that were going to be departing. That's T. Higgins and Trey Smith. Obviously, just go look at the Super Bowl. The offensive line is what they need to continue to build there in Kansas City, because you're going to run into this Philadelphia Eagles front again. And for the Cincinnati Bengals, the only way to get to the promised land, the playoffs, give Joe Burrow an opportunity, is if he's got that 2-headed monster out there, receiver, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Look, I know it's a big inflated number at the receiver position, even for the franchise tag, but if you were going to try to get a deal done with this guy, the number would be astronomical relative to that. So T. Higgins may not be too thrilled about it, but the reality of the situation is you get an opportunity to be part of this historic offense. The Bengals should be thrilled. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase both thrilled. But you're not the #1 receiver in that room, and that's got to weigh heavy on his conscience.
Well, you're not the #1 receiver in the room, but in talking to people around the Bengals, they think he's 1A. And sometimes when you are 1A and you go to another team and they're expecting you to be 1, it doesn't always work out. And I go back in history, Alvin Harper was 1A to Michael Irvin, and Dallas went to Tampa and never worked out there. So sometimes the best situation for you is where you are, and I think that's why the Bengals want to do everything they can to keep T. Higgins. You'll tag him now, try and work out a long-term deal with him. It's $26.2 million on the tag. If he were to play on the tag for the 3rd year next year, it goes up 144% over that. Or if that number isn't as high, it could be the quarterback number as well. So that would be way too much. So he's in a great negotiating position. I think he's going to get a long-term deal done. And you mentioned it. The dynamic of that offense changes when he's not on the field.
Yep.
You know, Chase is the best receiver. There's nobody will debate that. But when they don't have Higgins, the offense is different. I think this is a great opportunity to get long-term deals done with him. They'll get one done with Chase. They'll give Hendrickson an extension. The Bengals are doing it the right way.
Okay, yeah, and there's a lot of other shoes to drop, right? And you see it here to your point, Pete, with T. Higgins, 8-4 last season, without 1-4. Those are drastic numbers. And just to circle back on that $26.2 million, that's unless an extension is reached by July 15th, of course. So let's talk about Jamar Chase and Hendrickson, but Chase really specifically, because the Bengals have not been shy about saying, you know, hey, we want to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL, and that's all good, but it's a lot of money when you're looking at T plus him. Pete, what does this mean for Jamar Chase? And of course, we're already expecting him to make an astronomical amount of money, but then you're tagging T and spending money there as well. So what does it mean for Jamar Chase?
Well, they were close to giving him a long-term deal that would have made him that last year, and he played it out and ended up, hey, congrats to him. He won the Triple Crown. The guy's a great receiver. He's going to become the highest non-quarterback in the NFL. That's a fact. It's just a matter of when it gets done. What does that do? It means your offense and the focal point of your offense, throwing the football around with Joe Burrow, he's a happy man. What it also means is you better draft very well. And they picked 17th in the first round. There are options there for them, but they need to draft very well all the way down the line. And a lot of young players need to start stepping up and being part of that, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. If you looked at the Bengals right now, as they are constructed, the interior of the offensive line, not very good. The interior of the defensive line, not very good. So they need to draft people there. They also might bring back Mike Gesicki on a contract. They enjoyed what he did for them as the tight end last year. And all of a sudden you have your offensive playmakers all back in the fold. Get better on the offensive line.
Yeah, it's like that rush group we talked about with Dallas. When they added Osa back, they have the opportunity to continue to flourish on the defensive side of the ball. The theme in Cincinnati is offense, offense, offense.
Yeah.
And I know you're talking about Trey Hendrickson potentially getting under the cap and being able to get in there for a long-term deal. But if I'm a Bengals fan, I'm happier knowing that T. Higgins is still in the building. Jamar Chase is going to be taken care of, albeit very expensively taken care of. And Joe Burrow is still the guy that's throwing them the football. So Cincinnati, I think it's a win here. Trey Smith, we talked about, that's also a win for the Kansas City Chiefs.
They cleared up $8 million by releasing the turnstile Alex Kappa. He's out, so he's gone. They released that. And then Sam Hubbard also might be released and let go to free up another $9 million. So they're going to have about $90 million if they make those moves. $90 million of cap room. You could do a lot with that. So I think the Bengals are actually in a really good position.
Yeah, and Sam Hubbard, local guy, I feel like, you know, the fans won't like that, but they're happy with Jamar and Joe and T. Higgins for sure. So the theme there, offense, slow start, maybe not this upcoming season, fingers crossed for Bengals fans. And we talked about it off the top. The first tag that we saw was Trey Smith with the Kansas City, and Kyle, you touched on it a little bit. It feels like after what we saw in the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes getting sacked a whole lot, it was kind of a no-brainer to try and tag this guy and keep him around a little bit longer.
Yeah, Brett Veach and this Kansas City Chiefs offense really has got their backs against the wall, but this is one of the first steps at being able to retain that dominance in the offensive line, whether it be throughout the regular season and hopefully another game into the postseason. We saw that they were outmatched against the Philadelphia Eagles. Trey Smith is such a big part of the identity of that offensive line room, and you couple him with his other buddy, Creed Humphrey, the center. They came in together as rookies. You don't want to split these guys up. It's like, what's that movie, the book, Where the Red Fern Grows? The one dog
I never read that one.
So the one dog gets, you know, mangled on a barbed wire fence. He's not doing too hot. The other dog stops eating. You got to keep these dogs together so they can eat together. Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey, keep that group together as long as you can. Credit to these guys for getting it done. I've heard tag and trade with him, but they tagged him to keep him.
Yeah, try and get a long-term deal done with him. That's what they want to do. And if you look at this team, the strength of that team is the interior of the offensive line. The interior of the offensive line was weakened in large part because Joe Thuney went out and played tackle. Well, if they're together, it's the best group in the NFL. The most expensive, but the best group in the NFL. So why weaken yourself in that spot? I think it makes sense to bring them back. Now they have to figure out what they're going to do with tackles. And are you good enough at right tackle? They can't do much with him because of his contract, so he's probably going to be playing. Jawan Taylor will be the right tackle. They have to figure out what they're going to do at left tackle.
So, Pete, we just showed your list of top 100 free agents, and there's a guy who is #1 on that.
Recently, the Minnesota Vikings made a decision that left many fans with questions. Why didn't they tag their star quarterback, Sam Darnold, as a franchise player? In this video, we're going to break down why this move was more complicated than it seemed. We'll talk about the reasons why tagging Darnold and negotiating with him was much harder than expected, even with several teams interested. Stay tuned, because we explain it all here. Before diving into the franchise tag issue, it's worth mentioning that, despite not using the tag on Darnold, the Vikings are still looking for a way to secure a reliable quarterback for next season. Although negotiating with Darnold under that tag wasn't possible, the team remains alert to potential opportunities in the market. Will the Vikings look for an internal solution, or will they turn to other quarterbacks available in free agency or through trades? The reality is that tagging Sam Darnold as a franchise player would not only have complicated negotiations, but it also would have had a significant impact on the Vikings' salary cap. According to Blake Barretts, an NFL agent, the $41 million quarterback tag this year would have blocked a large portion of the cap space, something the Vikings couldn't afford. Moreover, the control of the situation was in Darnold's hands, as any trade would depend on his willingness to sign a long-term contract with another team, adding more uncertainty to the transaction. What do you think about the Vikings' decision not to tag Sam Darnold? Do you think they should have done it and risked losing valuable trade value? Or do you think it was best not to tie up their salary cap? Leave your opinion in the comments and discuss it with other fans. We'd love to know what you think about this situation and how you believe it will affect the Vikings' future in their search for a quarterback. Now, let's get to the main news that's causing a lot of buzz. Sam Darnold's situation with the Vikings is just the tip of the iceberg, as his future is at stake, and the Vikings' decision could change much more than just their salary cap. What will happen with Darnold now? Could letting him go and looking for an alternative be the smartest move for the team? We'll tell you more below. The Minnesota Vikings have decided not to tag Sam Darnold as a franchise player, which could completely change the course of their season. This decision means that Darnold could become a free agent in a matter of days, opening the door for offers from other teams. Despite rumors about the possibility of a trade, the reality is that the tag would have greatly complicated any move. The formula for a trade no longer seems viable, and the Vikings might lose Darnold without getting anything in return, leaving fans worried about the team's future. This decision could have a significant impact not only on Sam Darnold's future, but also on the Vikings' strategy for the upcoming season. By not using the tag, the team now faces the risk of losing a talented quarterback without receiving any immediate compensation. Additionally, by freeing up salary cap space, the Vikings may be in a position to pursue other quarterbacks in the market, but this comes with the uncertainty that the team might not find as solid an option as Darnold. This move directly affects the direction the team will take in the short term. What do you think of the Vikings' decision not to tag Sam Darnold? Do you think losing him without getting anything in return is a mistake? Or is it better to free up salary cap space for new opportunities? Should they have done everything possible to trade him before he became a free agent? Leave your opinion in the comments and let us know what you think about this strategic move by the Vikings. Thanks for joining us in this analysis of Sam Darnold's situation and the Minnesota Vikings. Don't forget to subscribe for more content on this and other hot topics in the world of American football. We'll see you in the next video with more exclusive news and analysis.